newly engaged? How many of you hope to be engaged? I hope so, inshallah. I hope so. All right. What I'm going to do very quickly is I'm going to give you a picture of what has happened to marriage very quickly over the last 50 years. Okay? I'm going to tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to tell you about the Islamic process and all of the Islamic understanding. That's for our Dr. Slami, because that's his expertise. I'm not going to give you anything else that Brother Javed is going to talk about. I'm going to take a risk right now. Okay? I'm going to take a risk in terms of putting myself out there. Because what you are seeing, and I'm going to be talking about challenges in terms of marriages, is somebody who is not an expert in terms of a marriage. What you're going to see is some reality around marriages through the eyes of perhaps my marriage model. I told my husband not to come tonight. Okay? I said, please don't come because I'm going to talk about you and me. So he's out there praying in Islam, making sure I do it right. All right? But anyway, what I will tell you is I'm going to give you two journeys. I'm going to do a story with you. And I want you to listen to the story in the hope that as you are going through this with me, something will connect in terms of some of the challenges that we may meet on this journey. I have two journeys I'm going to build in. My first journey is my arrival to Canada. How many of you have been here late 60s, early 70s? Let me, a show of hands, please. Yeah, thank you. Pioneers, sort of, right? Who came in the 80s? Yeah, this is when all the rotis and the samosas started. We can actually buy them. In the 90s, the newbies, okay? We did all the hard work and they're walking on our backs, right? Okay. And the 2000s, babies, okay? You should be ever so thankful because we used to go to some godforsaken farm to go and cut a chicken before we could eat it, literally feather it as well. Marriage, therefore, has a cycle. And as we talk about this, you're going to see some key themes emerging, I hope, right? My spouse and I came as newlywed from South Africa. We didn't know anything about Canada except what I'd seen in my geography lessons. You know, they told me it was cold and there was snow, but nobody told me how much of it was. Right? In 1970, October, we had a snowfall. Those were snowfalls. What you got out there is nothing, all right? And some of the people here will agree with me. That was our first challenge as a couple. We were here, we had no family. We came here, and we had to find a job. My first job was selling shoes, though I had a degree. And I figured after that, there was only one place to go up, all right? But alhamdulillah, we were really thrilled that both of us were able to get some work so we could begin our home together. What we found very quickly is that the so-called honeymoon period was very quickly over in terms of the reality of a new immigrant, newlywed couple. So I'm going to talk about the first 10 years of our life. Think of it as a birthing process. And the first thing was, of course, there was euphoria. We were in a new country, we were excited, we were newlyweds. The challenge of the snow, well, you can get boots and stuff. Okay, we'll manage with that. Finding a job and putting food on the table was a huge issue. Huge issue. How are we going to manage to do that in terms of our earnings and how are we going to build on that? So that was another challenge for us. It is really interesting to know that that first 10 years, from 0 to about 7, the research is really clear. We had high risk, at high risk. And I remember in 1994, as I was reading a research, 1994, a research was done where through observation and analysis, they could predict which marriages were going to be successful with 90% accuracy and which were going to fail. And some of the things I'm going to talk about are some of the pieces that we're looking at. So we have research out there. Go and read it. Look at it. The Islamic perspective is really important. That's the content. It's the operation, it's how we move with it that becomes for many of us an issue, because we're in competing interests here. We have our faith and we have our culture. And one of the first things we had to do as newlyweds was learn to adjust with each other. Now I'll tell you what drove me crazy, and I'm sure similar things drove my husband crazy. Okay, I'd get up in the morning and the toothpaste was on the wrong side of the mirror. Okay, drove me crazy. Because, and he needed it to be on another side. All right, we had to negotiate where we're going to put the toothpaste. We solved it. You get your toothpaste and I'll get mine. All right, it's called a compromise. Okay, so those are the silly little things that you begin to learn about each other. You know, which side of the bed you're going to sleep on. All right, you take the blanket every night and I don't have any and I'm cold. Or stop putting the blanket on me, I'm boiling and you're freezing. So we had to negotiate that maybe you need a blanket and I need a sheet. All right, so these are some of the challenges of adjustment that you talk about. Now, the biggest issue for us was that coming from back home, wherever that is, we had to decide, because we're in a new place, new hours of work, how we were going to run that home. And perhaps we were young, that helped. Perhaps the fact that the family wasn't there helped, because there were cultural expectations for me as a new first daughter-in-law. But in a new place, we quickly realized one of the challenges was that we needed to clean the house. Nobody else was going to clean it if we didn't. We both agreed that it was good for me to work. I had a degree, I needed to work. I had spent all my life doing that, and I wanted to go on and continue to do the work. But that would mean we would actually have to negotiate who did what. Now, for example, today, I was at work because I'm covering for some of my colleagues who wanted to take the day off. And when I came home, the house was vacuumed, it had been dusted, and the table was laid. Why? Because I knew when I come, I was scrambling to get here. But I never take those things for granted. So one challenge, one thing I would suggest to my sisters and brothers is we very frequently say to each other, thank you for doing that. I'm so pleased that you did that for me. Because that is never taking each other for granted. And that's the biggest thing, we take each other for granted. We forget sometimes. We're in the haste to do things. So there's your 1970 to 1980 as we started to live here and get rooted. Very quickly, we realized by the time we hit end of 1970 that we had 2 children. That was a challenge. The first thing that hit us was, okay, what about the Islamic stuff? Those of us who were here would know that there were no real madrasas, there were no mosques, there was nothing in Mississauga. And when we went to masjid, it was the weekend down to the Jami. That was the only place we could go to. How are we going to do this? How are we going to move so that our children grew up in terms of an Islamic ethos? And we realized very quickly, if we didn't do it, they wouldn't do it. If you are not willing to put your money where your mouth is, they're not going to do it. They're going to do what they see you do. We learned that very quickly. And we realized also that the kids were smart. They would go to dad, because dad was a softie, and say, you know, so-and-so is doing such a thing, can we go? And they will say, yeah, sure, you can go. And then they come to me, and they'll say, we're going so-and-so. And I would say, who said you could? Because of these reasons. And they'll say, Dad said okay. And they were wedging us. That was a challenge. I remember calling Daddy in and sitting him down and saying, listen, Dad, you're a softie, they know you. Next time they come, you say, have you spoken to your mom? And then we'll decide together. So that was another challenge in terms of rearing the kids, in nurturing them and giving them the time. Now we're into about 20 years of marriage. But in that marriage, while there's challenges, and the challenges is the immigrant experience. Back home, we lost our first, one of my parents passed away. And when you're back here and the illness back home, it tugs at you. We had to deal with that. We had to deal with it from an Islamic perspective. We had to deal with it from a sense of skill to know, what do I do? How do I deal with this? And how do I grow? We had the wisdom, I think, because of necessity, to begin to group together and find people who wanted to be part of an ummah. There wasn't too much of it. So I would pick up the book and phone what sounded was Muslim names and say, are you, my name is this and this, are you from, we're wondering if you're in the neighborhood would like to come and make Eid with us, because we wanted to build that community, alhamdulillah. It also meant how we talk to each other. It's the biggest issue. And I think you're going to hear about communications. Am I correct? Somewhere today, Prajad? Yeah. So I'm not going to touch that, because I think that was the biggest issue we had. How do we talk to each other? How do we play with each other? How do we laugh with each other, not at each other? When we were upset or angry, how do we step back? One of us would step back, and the other person would, just let it go. So we had to learn that, because there were moments when that challenge came, whether it was the kids, it was finance, it was entertaining people, it was going to work, the car broke down. All of this was very real. I'm going to bring you back now to a pattern of behavior, what we were looking for. It was we had to actually walk in the other person's shoe to begin to understand. What were they trying to say? I'll tell you one thing. If some of you have read the book, it's called, I think, Women Are From Mars, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. Any of you read that? Yeah. Well, there's a saying that goes like this, that when a man goes off to work, he's got 2,000 words, and a woman has 4,000. So by the time the man comes home, he's used up his 2,000 words, but the woman still has 2,000 more to tackle. All right? So anyway, what I'm suggesting here is that, I would get a hum for a whom for a whatever, and I'm still pattering along. But to realize that we both needed time out, that when we did independent things, it was okay. It didn't mean that if I was here and my spouse was somewhere else, that we were not in a good relationship. Now, the 1990s to 2000, I now have grown children. And of course, the next challenge is marriage. And with it, an added challenge, which was, oh boy, I'm going to be one of those dreaded outlaws. All right, I'm going to have a daughter-in-law. And what is the expectation? And to actually begin to realize that if I wanted my son to be happy, I had to make my daughter-in-law very happy. I had to make sure that I did not interfere in that relationship, that I treated that relationship with value, that there was a boundary between us and them, that we did not encroach in their space, and that we'd build a relationship with that. Now, having gone through that process of marriage also for us was a very challenging experience. I only had one expectation for my children. I said, I don't care what color they are, what nationality they are, what race they are, what language they speak, which part of the world they come from, as long as they will come and they'll leave you closer to your Creator. And when you make the salat, they will make it with you. That's the only expectation I have. So I have pretty much a multicultural, multiracial, if you wish, family. I have a family, a daughter-in-law whose family comes from Trinidad, and I have a daughter-in-law whose family comes from Pakistan. And I have grandchildren now who say we're Canadian. Incredibly diverse, and learning how then to bring that family together so that we continue to be a family. That was a challenging situation. Let me bring you to the most critical piece. Within that 16 to 22, it ain't over yet, folks. You think you escaped the risk of the first 7 years? 16 to 22 is the most critical time in a marriage. You're not over the hump. That is the time when incredible counseling is required and marriage is really poof. And we were at that stage. And indeed, we had to deal with something that really caused us grief. And that was the recession of 1980s, when my spouse, who had an excellent job, was let go. And we struggled with that. We struggled with the fact that he was used to coming home. We struggled with the fact that I was still working. We struggled with the fact that he felt that the boys, I have 2 sons, would probably not appreciate what he had done. But what he did do, which was amazing, is that's when I had to go and do my master's program. And he said, listen, while I'm at home, you don't do anything in the house. I'm going to support you. I will do the cooking. And God bless him. If it hadn't for him, I wouldn't have clothes to go to work with, or the kids for that matter. He took over. So we negotiated that. It didn't come easy. We really needed to negotiate through that hump. So there was always a balance in terms of how we were negotiating. Did we get upset with that? Yes. Did we have little fights? Of course. If you can show me a perfect marriage, I'd love to come and learn from you folks.
Look, my mom didn't mean to offend you.
Why do you always take her side? Do you know what it's like to be constantly criticized by someone every day?
She's not always criticizing you. This is temporary, okay? Until I graduate.
All right? There are good marriages. And romance never fades, no matter how long you are. And let me bring you to the final sort of piece, because I think my time is coming to an end, which is, I am very near 45 years of my marriage. Alhamdulillah. Is there anybody here who is 50 years?
50 years?
50 years?
50,
50, 50.
50 of years? But no zero. Without the zero.
Without the zero, well, I'm looking for somebody with 5 and 0. Anybody? Anybody 40? MashaAllah. These are your internal, alhamdulillah, these are your internal experts, folks. Go and find out from them what they did to make it work. All right? These are your models and patterns that you're going to learn from. It's a give and take. It's an up and down. There is no, as I said, good or bad. Now, remember I told you that with 90% accuracy, they will be able to tell you which marriage are going to succeed and which are going to fail. At the end of it, there were 2 things that made a marriage. One, you hear the young people these days talking about my BF, my best friend, or they'll say my BFL, my best friend for life. Well, 2 things. One was that they found that in the happily married couples who had a degree of, I'm not saying there was no pain, loss of life, loss of children. I buried 2 siblings during that time. I've lost my parents. By the time I was 30, I'd lost both my parents. So there is pain, but there's the joy of the birthing. There's pain, but there's the joy of marriage, the letting go. Is they treated each other as best friends, not as spouses. Somebody said to me, we treat our friends better than we treat our spouses. The day we treat our spouses first as our friend, then we will have spouses who will be with us. You have to work on it every day. You have to work on it every minute. You have to work at everything you do to begin to really talk to each other. The greatest challenge, folks, is going to be how you handle conflicts in a positive way. Not through a slap, not through a kick, not through walking out, not to getting, and I'll tell you one thing, go to people who know both of you. The biggest issue that I've had to deal with people is when families have interfered in marriages. Every time I've had to deal with marriage, and a lot of women have come that we've had to deal with, and men, it has been interference in those marriages. So be the best friend you can be. I can't promise you a perfect marriage, but I can promise you that there will be challenge, and I have my next, if I make by Allah's will, the next 50 years, 50, I don't know what that's going to look like. I'm learning on the job. I'm learning on the job. Maybe, I hope not that there will be illness. I hope not that there will be a loss that we cannot deal with. I hope, by the grace of God, that the marriage in the next couple of years will continue to be better than it was in the last 45 years. And I know, I have the wisdom to know that as I walk through this next, whatever your Allah has given me, it will be with challenges. But I also know the wisdom that there are people in the community who will help me walk through it. So shukran, assalamu alaikum.